All right, hey everybody, good evening. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Our look's a little different tonight. You can see that I have, so we got Trevor in doing some training with us, so it's great to have Trevor jump on, join us tonight. We had Trevor on just, 2 weeks ago, right, Trev? Something like that. Introduced your podcast, which is coming up. Hard Living Better podcast, right? Which is coming up. We launched that yet?
Yes.
Perfect, excellent.
Well, there's no actual episodes out there available for people to see yet.
Gotcha. But it's been
Have we
launched.
filmed a couple? Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So we still are. Everyone's waiting for it to actually fully be released. But we also have Dustin Dodore, Brad Vandalite with us as always. So podcast too, just to see where you're at with that and get an update. But tonight, when we jump into this, guys, I thought because Trevor was in town doing some training, I had a different topic set up. But I thought what might be a really interesting conversation for the four of us to have is again, most people that are listening or watching this are familiar with David Goggins, right? And David Goggins, who has a lot of quotes, a lot of different sayings, a lot of different things. But he just came out. I believe it's his new book. I don't even know really. I haven't. I just saw a clip of it or a cover of it, and maybe it's his old book. I don't know. But the title was Never Finished. And it kind of just, it just kind of resonated something with me. And I thought what would be fun is to talk about the journey. Because for a lot of people, I mean, we're in a real growth phase right now where we got a lot of new people that are, wanting and interested in the weaponization process. They want to be able to protect themselves, their family, property, all that kind of stuff. But we have a different background. I've done martial arts. Trevor's obviously done a long career in combative sports and martial arts. Dustin, you have experience. I just thought it was very interesting that if you added up the combined years that we've all been training, there is some extensive time commitment, money commitment, energy commitment. There's all of it. And so I thought, what an interesting conversation is to talk about the journey. And maybe I'll segue to this and then we'll head to our intro. I think a lot of people in any new endeavor talk about how hard it is to get started, right? That seems to be the thing. You just got to get started, build a habit in 20 days or 30 days. But for me, it's like, is getting started harder, or is it harder when you realize that you're never fucking finished? Like there is no end to the pursuits of whatever it is, excellence, all that type of stuff. So I'll give you guys a few seconds to think. I'm going to cut to the intro. When we get back, we're going to dive deep on the whole idea of the journey and the fact that one is never finished. Who has a repeat?
I was going to say, I think there's a ton we could unpack here. But just one simple thing that hit me when you first said it is, is it hard? Is it hard to think like, oh man, like you're never going to be done? And I think one part of that is because of the way our training has been designed from day one is when I first signed up, I was never given a promise of achieving anything other than just the ability to keep myself safe, keep my family, future family safe. I didn't have a family back then, not like wife and kids. And so because there was never a promise of something like, a trophy, a medal, a belt, a certain certificate, insert whatever kind of award you want to have, any sort of, official acknowledgement, that was never really about that. It was always just, you're going to learn a certain specific set of skills that's going to help save your life someday. And if that's enough, then, come on board. And I think because of that, from day one, my mindset was always just, I'm just here to train. I'm here to learn, and I will keep doing that to get as good as I can get until I can't do it anymore. And so I was never chasing, a certain object or an accolade. I've only ever been in search of mastery. So yeah. It's different.
Yeah, it is 100%. Brad.
Yeah, that actually what you said really resonates with me because I totally agree with that sentiment for sure. I've always thought of it this way, maybe not at the beginning, but definitely in the last decade. When you talk to people that have something in their life, there's very much of something that is like, oh, I go and do this. It's almost like a thing that they're not chasing, but it's an event. Oh, I go and do this twice a week, or I go do this 3 times a week. At this place. And I think that when you are on this journey and on many journeys, well, what's your goalpost? And for us, like, it is not that goalpost of like, oh, I have achieved success. I am now done. That's not, we've never talked that way. This is an integration of our lives. It's an integration into our family lives. So it's more of who you are as opposed to something you go and do. Because when you go and do something, I believe that's easy. I go to the gym. That's not your identity, right? You know, that's something you go and do. That's why I think it's really hard for people to either get started or restart to go to the gym. But when you're talking about something that is part of your core identity, rooted into your belief systems, your values, and everything, you don't just stop that, right? That's who you are. It's who you are. It's how you choose to live your life. So I think it's a very different perspective than just something you go and do.
I got you. Yeah. There's a couple things I want to unpack, but I want to let Trevor I keep hitting my headset here. You go ahead, Trev.
Okay, so the question is, why did we start? Is that the question?
Not really. I think the question for those that were paying attention is, I think
Props to you guys.
yeah, props to you guys. No, I think two things. One, like, I think most people think getting started is hard, but like, you've been training. How long you been training for? Like, total, since from a kid. Like, when?
About 35 years. Yeah.
Okay, so about 35 years. So
In martial arts.
Yeah. So being that far down the journey, if we go back, was getting hard? What's getting started hard? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, because you're a kid, you have this interest, but for 35 years now, you've been training. And so what is the concept never finished? Like, do you see an end goal? Like, is there an end state for you? Or is it literally like, no, this is never done? And because a lot of people, I think that's overwhelming.
Absolutely, and it is, as these gentlemen have started, is so different from the person that I was in the middle of the journey, and
Yep.
it's so much different than the person that I am now. And starting was almost like this. This isn't that popular anymore, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the base, you've got your physiological sort of survival
Yeah.
needs. And I've talked about it on the podcast before.
Yeah.
But as a young person, was not like super confident and was, in sort of violent altercations on the wrong end of them.
Yep.
And it's like, I need to do this just to get to be better
Just to survive.
at real world self-defense or, like little schoolyard fights. And that was one level. And then, that was almost like the safety sort of need as well.
Yeah.
And then getting into it, there was so much, you sort of realize, you always kind of know it in the town that I grew up in anyway, probably most towns, probably most places. But there was so much social capital attached to the martial arts. And this is why there's so much, posturing and so much talk and so much energy around martial arts, because it's such a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And so the social capital, that was almost kind of semi-addictive in the early stages.
Yep.
So then we go to the kind of love and belonging kind of stage,
Yep.
and that was part of that as well. And it was you create, you're involved in, and slash you as time goes on, we are creating this community of people we train with and friends, and it was always the space is always pervaded by this constant ever-ending improvement that the best martial arts would provide. There was boxing and kickboxing in the beginning, and then jiu-jitsu and Jaikido concepts later, and now that continues to build out as well.
Yeah.
And as we get closer to the top, where you become like meaning and eventually self-actualization, that's kind of it's the direction is self-actualization, but it's something that is never actually realized. But because of the martial arts and because of the power of the martial arts and because of the logic and just the imperative that combat gives us, to say we have to be prepared for this. So every sort of attribute, every sort of physical quality we have has to be developed, from skills to conditioning to mental toughness to awareness and all the line familiarization that entails. So becoming the best version of yourself all the time, and that never ends, and it keeps going. And then as we're getting, as well, these two aren't, but as you and I are getting a little bit older here, then you're kind of you're getting ready for that, what that's going to be like, because eventually there's going to be a little bit of a decline in the physiological, like the athletic attributes of strength and speed and cardiovascular capacity. So you're building your game in different directions in order to balance that out. We
Yeah.
talked about this before on the last podcast.
Yeah.
But training methods built out properly can help us to sort of circumnavigate
Yep.
some of the what people would see as the basically the deterioration that goes with aging.
With aging, yeah.
So it's certainly never finished, and done right, it's getting better, and that's life. You know, you're
Yeah.
constantly growing through this practice, and so it's very very beautiful and spiritual and life enhancing, and so it's certainly never over. And done right, it continues to get better.
Yeah. Do you think then that though? Because I mean, I completely agree with you, and I my experience, I would say, parallels that as well. I guess the question, more devil's advocate, even in a way, is like, is that inherent in the training process, regardless of if you're doing martial art, combative sport, or practical self-defense, whatever term you want to put to it? Do you think most people that get into this type of realm in whatever facet, do you think that the training of the arts lends itself to that organically, or is how much of the person is brought into that? Like how much of that is like character, like growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and like how many people do you see that you've been doing it for 35 years? How many people have you seen over the time? And this is to everybody, that are 5 years, 7 years, decade guys, then they're gone. Many more are 2 years or 3 years. And so I guess it is this thing like Brad, and this is where I tie it into what you talked about self-image. Like, and to go back, you referenced fitness for a bit. Now, someone can go to a gym, and that's something they do. But you have lots of people that are their deepest core beliefs are in their health and vitality and all this stuff. And so, they'll go to the gym and they'll do a million other things that you talk about. The self-actualization is the term you used, which is very powerful. So you're going to see people that through different vehicles, fitness, martial arts, business, are on a path of self-actualization where they are never finished. They're always growing. But what I'm kind of thought about with this, one of the ways is, do we think that martial arts itself lends itself to that, develops that? Like, are the training methods developing that in the MMA gyms today? In our gym, as we train guys tactically, is this part of what our end goal is? Like, I know for myself, and then I'll let you guys jump in on it. I'm very focused right now on, because of the state of the world, helping people build out a real solid foundation of functional skill sets, knowledge, all that type of stuff. Majority continue on with me, and then there's more of this self-actualization process brought in much later, but they've got to survive that first. Like they're brought to it for something. Does that kind of make sense? So do you think it's inherent in martial arts more than other things, or do you think it's just an innate quality in the person?
Not necessarily, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So what is required is that either the person themselves that we're referring to is their own sort of coach and the own sort of the manager of their life, and is able to sort of take in all the variables involved with training. So there's the skill sets and the attributes that underpin them, and there will be, like I said, a decline in physiology. There is the practice of certain martial arts is hard on the body, just plain and simple.
Yeah.
So how we navigate that? This is where a person has to either become their own sort of coach and be aware of all that and have that built into their own developmental plan, or have somebody that is helping them is kind of doing it for them. And neither one of those are that common.
Yeah.
But there is certainly examples of people that we know that, in their 60s and their 70s were continuing to improve.
Yep.
That's the exception, not the rule, though.
Yeah.
So something doesn't just by itself doesn't lend itself to that, and unfortunately it's like the risk reward sort of model. The more combative the martial art is, the harder it is on the body.
Yeah.
Like wrestling and Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu are quite, an MMA are quite hard on the body, just plain and simple.
Yeah.
And when we're talking to kids that want to get into the sport and they're coming up, we say, okay, this is great, you want to do this, and this is a warrior's path, and there's like so many blessings that this is going to provide you with, but watch the older fighters. And by older, we mean like 28 and above. Like watch what their bodies are going through on
28.
on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Because you can just go head to toe. It'll be a neck, it'll be a shoulder, it'll be a spine, and all the MMA guys that listen to this, yeah, that's about right. And it'll be a knee, and so it's hard on the body,
Yeah.
and it has it can have a deleterious effect on one's physiology, but there is a way to go through all that.
Yep.
Where you get all the blessings without those problems, but that doesn't happen by itself.
Yeah. Gotcha.
You have to be hyper aware or have somebody in your orbit that is hyper aware
Yeah.
of how that all works,
Yeah.
how to go through it properly.
Yeah, you definitely. It's not the model that is easily visible. Like you don't just look up and go, "This is how the guys are training in the gym with this long picture in mind," and how they're, like you said, navigating through all of the different, challenges that are going to come with that. But so let me ask this then for you guys, Brad and Dustin, then. In your journey, like for having been over 20, you guys are both sitting right around the 25-year mark. If you look at that over those 2.5 decades here, where has your motivation, like, has it waned? Are you just as passionate now, more passionate now? How have you got through, or was there ever moments when you were like, I think I'm getting close to the end of the journey? I mean, Dustin, you've already alluded to this, that because you weren't chasing a crucible end moment, that it's kind of always had this naturalness of like, I'm just going to keep going. But that doesn't mean
The effects are seen in the training tempo. That's where I've had the ups and downs. I had a solid decade in the beginning where I didn't miss a thing. Like you didn't hold a program that I wasn't at.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And my brother. And it was kind of like if you were going to host a program, you were like, well, I know there's 2 spots in Edmonton filled, and then I'll see what else I can fill. Maybe Brad's coming up, whatever. Like, but it was like you didn't even have to ask us. Like you knew we were going to be there. But then and like marriage for me wasn't a big deal. But then you start having kids, and all of a sudden, okay, training tempo slowed a little bit with the first kid, but not bad. Second kid, training tempo grinded down a lot more. Didn't stop, but a lot different. And then you endure that for, I forget if it was a year or 2 of a different tempo than what I was used to. But then, life changes, things go on, kids get older, get easier. And then that tempo starts to pick up, and then life goes on even more. And then maybe career gets even more stable. And all of a sudden training tempo is at the highest it's been in a very long time. Yeah. And so I think for me, training tempo, absolutely. It takes hits here and there, but I don't think the desire, the motivation, the enjoyment, everything else continues to build and grow, even when the tempo comes down. Because again, like we all know, there's solo training, there's mental training, there's a lot of stuff you can do, even if you're not showing up necessarily. So
getting that dedicated training with the coaching kind of thing and stuff, right?
Yeah.
How about you, Brad?
Yeah, you know what? I could speak to it for our realm, but I have a hard time articulating it for people not weaponizing, right? And I think that when you think about the journey of, protecting yourself, your loved ones, your family against violent criminal assault is ownership. And it's like we talk about this all the time. It's like, do you own the problem? And it's like, if that answer is yes, you own the problem. At what age do you stop ownership of that problem?
Yeah.
Right? At what point in that journey are you like, I don't own that problem anymore. I'm not really worried about my life being threatened and my family's life, being threatened. It's like, well, no, so I think that ownership of that problem, it's like, well, how can you, tempo could always change, right? But again, it's like, do you still own the problem or do you not? Have you relinquished the responsibility of your own personal safety and well-being, or is that on somebody else's to-do list now?
Yeah.
Right? So I think that for me is something that really resonates, is like, you own the problem.
Well, I think there's actually I don't know if the connection's clear or not to anybody else, but for me, what you said and what Trevor's talking about is very, very similar, because if you really genuinely come into it with a concern of just saying, listen, my parents raised me to genuinely believe in my right to life. My dad, self-defense rights never denied. And I was taught to value a freedom the man has to defend himself. So you develop these beliefs, these paradigms, this, and so I see the problem in the world and say, okay, it's my responsibility. So that is where I'm never finished, because I would never want to. I will never willingly relinquish my my freedoms, my rights, my responsibility to do that. But if also you look at somebody else and say, well, what happened in this person's life that made them crave self-actualization? Because, you know, Trevor, we talked about in the martial art world, and you said, like, it is unfortunately not probably the norm. You don't just look around the gym and go, look at all these guys chasing self-actualization, and they're navigating all these pitfalls. I mean, you're a big advocate of this right now. We've talked about it before. But a lot of young, I guess we'll just speak to men, but it's a lot of young men and women, but they're getting into, you know, the combative sports, the martial arts, whatever it is. And like, because you have walked this path for 35 years, you're saying, listen, I see you chasing a short-term gratification that might not be as gratifying as you want it to be. Meaning, you know, most fighters don't come out of it financially ahead of the game. They come out often financially worse for wear. Their bodies are taking a toll, all this stuff. So again, it's this interesting thing about, what is that dynamic? What happens to somebody where they get on this thing where go, no, this journey is never finished? Like Tom O'Connor. I think, I mean, obviously you know him way better than I know him, but from what I know of him and the times that I've been around him, I have a very clear image of him being a lifelong martial artist. Like, I can see him in his 70s teaching kids class, like just loving the arts and sharing the knowledge he wants to accumulate. That's an interesting guy, right?
Absolutely. Now, he may not be the norm.
Yeah, I know. I think he's not the norm
least.
because he has this thing. And it's like, because you know him, so like, was that always in him? Was that something that you feel like that he picked up because he's around you?
He's kind of an old soul.
Okay.
What's up, Tom? And so teaching, like introducing him to all these concepts was quite easy.
Yeah.
And he would see, you know, the beginning and the middle and the end, and
Yeah.
or the path that is never really over would be a better way of saying it.
Yeah.
And that, like, say, what do you want to do? You just want to be the best version of yourself, period.
Mm-hmm.
And so at a certain point, those things, like one's physical development and everything that entails, and the martial arts skills, and they converge.
Mm-hmm.
But after a certain amount of training time, they can diverge a little bit too.
Sure. Yeah.
And it becomes very hard on the body. And everybody that competes in MMA, you know, long-term issues of one kind or another, like we want to help everybody become more aware of this, is that for athletes, an athletic career, a competitive athletic career, is going to be a limited portion of one's life.
Yeah.
And maybe it's 30, maybe it's 40, maybe it's 55, maybe it's 57 or 58.
Yeah.
But the 57, 58 is unlikely, or one of our friends is doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the 40 is more like the ceiling. And because in our other directions we discussed, we're trying to help people live longer and longer.
Sure. Yeah.
Then if you're doing things to hurt your body when you're younger, then you're not going to be able to enjoy this energy and enjoy this power. And that's like, the martial arts is all becoming a more powerful person, becoming like a more effective conduit to which, like, the physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual energy manifests itself through. And so if you damage yourself when you're younger, you can't experience that the way you would like when you're older. Your capacity to defend yourself and your capacity to defend life, that will be a little bit reduced as well if you're not careful when you're younger.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and it's really hard to do, because young people will be ostensibly more intelligent. They think faster than older people, but they're not. It's hard to have wisdom when you haven't seen patterns over a long period of time.
That's right. Yeah.
So when you see them, you see the people in the gym that are older that have, you know, this issue or that issue, and just talk to them, and just and go online and look at the old UFC fighters that are retired now, and how their bodies are, and not all of them, but many of them, and that's most professional athletes. So realize, so competing, there's some great things about it, and it brings out the best of us in whatever we're doing in that moment. But find a way to do that without hurting yourself long term, just plain and simple.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because your life, most people's life, will not be, you know, related to their athletic outcomes. Very few will make money doing it.
Yep.
Like you know, how many martial arts have we known over the years? Thousands.
Yeah.
How many have made money?
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah.
Any of them, not anymore. They would have made just
Yeah.
at a normal with a normal career. It doesn't have the same wear and tear.
Yep, 100%.
So that's with like trying to help people going forward, and you don't want to give people a lecture. They wouldn't listen anyway. But that's a very important concept.
Yeah, I think too, like one of the concepts that well, and I said it at the beginning, like for me right now, I'm very, very focused on this zero to formidable, and I genuinely believe that people are in real need of skill sets that have not really been around, not been taught, you know what I mean, the weaponizing, all that type of stuff. But even from the very beginning, I believe there always has to be a 360 degree understanding, or maybe another way to put that is you got to see the long game. And I mean, you've known me for a lot of years, so we, in my 20s and stuff, but I've always have had my eyes somewhat on the long game, and being very aware of like, okay, how am I, what is this going to be like in 20 years, 30 years, and how am I going to be? Because kind of what Brad said and stuff is I never wanted to be in a position like it was before. I never wanted to have to relinquish my right to defend myself and my capabilities. So I think even when you are like, so much of the psychology work we do and the integration of all of that stuff is part of that long game, and that work is never done. And the mind, one of my favorite sayings is the mind must precede the body, meaning that I'm a big believer that a lot of mental work can be done in specific areas that will save your body. You know what I mean? Like, like the School of Hard Knocks, the old school methodology of like, the first time I ever met Junior, we were together and, we were talking about, I can't remember what it was, this technique or that. And Junior's right away, why don't you guys just spar? Like, just fucking figure it out. You know what I mean? And it's like, and that was what you brought, but you were part of that, like that. We went through that more that, well, let's just fucking put the gloves on or not put gloves on, however it happens, and let's figure this shit out. And so, I like
those weren't my words.
No, of course not. Those were not Trent's words, but that school of hard knocks is different now. Like we know more about, psychology, performance imagery, all of the different tactical levels of control, all of these different things that, and this is a bit of a question, maybe slightly off this, but how effective do you think that stuff is for fighters nowadays? Like you have a vantage point of being around a lot of professional fighters. How much work are they investing into the imagery? How have you seen that type of work develop over the last number of years? Because I know for you guys, how big a role has it played in your development? And how much, how much time do you put into the theater of the mind, the work, all of the psychology and stuff? And how much do you feel that has saved your body? So I guess two kinds of questions. How much do you see it working in fighters today? And how much do you value that and appreciate the wear and tear it is saving you on your body, right? If you see it that way. So it doesn't matter.
What it made me think about something, because with all the psychology and the mental framework and the imagery and all that stuff is like, it goes hand in hand. You can't, for what we do, is you can't do one without the other, right? But what kind of, as you were talking, one of the feelings that I got from it was that how much did that mold my identity? Again, coming back to that for me, is like that really rooted everything that we're doing, because how many times have we done courses where it is literally just conversations about, violence and conversations about belief systems on that and things of that nature. So it's like, how do you not embark on a journey that is not just to achieve a specific end game? Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that made sense, but
no, it does. It does. If I get even more specific and drill it down even deeper, for example, like if you're working like termination, you're working avalanche strategy, whatever. So you're doing the most ballistic tools you have. Like you're just in there. I mean, if a guy wants to say, okay, I'm going in and I'm going to put in 2-3 hours into this, 2-3 hours of like, in Thai box would be 2-3 hours of, pad work or whatever it is. And it's like, that has a toll. I mean, you can attest to that, how much pad work, holding pads, hitting pads. I mean, it's a fucking grind. How much of that mental imagery, when people understand and say, listen, there is a balance. Do you have to put in the hard work? Do you have to grind? Do you have to, have that impact and all that type of stuff? Yes, you do. It's part of it. But to what degree, I think that formula is been changed because we know more about the mental psychology side of things and sports performance and all this stuff. That, you know what I mean? You've done a lot of work in termination, and how much of that are you doing at full speed, breakneck, like, you know, firing those tools and going home the end of the night going, holy fuck, you know, you're in your 40s and being like, I feel like I'm fucking 70. Like that, you know what I mean? Like that's part of this conversation of being never finished. What are those alternative paths that people can take?
Well, just how much more juice out of the squeeze you get when you're actually tying that to your imagery along the way,
Yeah.
right? You don't need to be banging like all day long, you know. And plus too, like I remember years ago studies coming out talking about, you know, like the test of like basketball players shooting free throws, actually doing a mix of that and imagery, and then doing just imagery. You know, like I think it's undeniable how powerful imagery is in anything, you know, to achieve specific outcome.
Yeah. What about you, Trev? What are you seeing that in the fighters today?
In the better fighters, almost all of them, and that they get. So we have goal setting, visualization, self talk, arousal control, sports psychology, very similar to the model that we discussed today that you use. And so with that, you think about like each one of those is, you know, has like an aspect of the imagery and visualization, of course, is a defined category of its own. And so the better fighters are all doing that. And fighters, that could be jiu-jitsu athletes, Muay Thai athletes, MMA competitors. And with now their objective is to win this competition and then to go on to win another competition, this kind of thing. With your overall game that you are sort of helping everybody build out and the kind of the worldview and everything that entails, there's a little bit more going on, because one of your objectives is not to necessarily be in a quote unquote fight.
Yeah.
And whereas a competitive martial artist, that's not even, of course, that's like it is to be in the fight and to win the fight.
Yeah.
And there's rules and it's one-on-one and it's just very different in that way. But if one was just going to want to be, for its own sake, the best possible martial artists in all ranges, be a part of that, and there's lots of overlap. There'd be a little bit more with what you're doing, because there's just more going on in the sense, like, say, we want to avoid these situations. We want to, like, everything, prints and indicators, and basically profiling and everything that entails. That's a little bit more visualization involved than a competitive martial artist per se. But to get back to the question itself, the best athletes in the world in general are doing visualization and more all the time, and that kind of mental training per se.
100%. Yeah, Dustin, how about you and your over the years and more of it now, and how would you feel it's impacted you?
Yeah, you know, I think of how we do everything. If you look at like our training methods, I mean, you know, we're doing this for self-protection, and we don't have the benefit of knowing when that moment might come, when that righteous fight might be. So we've done everything, all our training methods, everything we do is sort of designed around the concept that, like, you can't afford to be injured, because, you know, if you have a blown out shoulder or a blown out knee or ankle or whatever it is, it's like you're pretty, you know, you're at a great disadvantage for protecting yourself until that fully recovers, heals. Will it ever be the same? All that stuff. So I think that's where we stand out a lot, is everything we do is geared towards, like Brad said, not banging, not causing injury, that sort of thing. Now, do we still have benchmarks, crucible experiences? Of course we do. That's why we do scenario training. I think that has to be a part of it, but not every training session. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's where you see the biggest difference in what we do. And because of that, I mean, there's three of us here that have been doing this for a combined, 85 years or something. And I mean, between the three of us, like, how many serious injuries? Almost none. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not because what we do is a joke. Like it, like I said, in scenarios and stuff, it can be pretty intense, but it's here and there. It's, you know, it's when it's needed. But for the most part, I think the training methods do keep us in a healthier state for obvious reasons. And yeah, I think we continue to reap the benefits of that, because, you know, like Trev said, you know, ask a 28-year-old fighter, And like we all kind of laugh because sadly we're all way beyond 28. But I think we're all in pretty good physical shape when it comes to injury and stuff. So I see us as extremely fortunate for our process, you know.
Well, isn't this an interesting thing, right? Because if you train for violence, and violence is about one thing, and that's destruction and all this stuff. But like Trevor said, you are training at its core to avoid the situations that would require you to have to physically engage. If and when that happens, you are training with all of the different, like I said, pre-incident indicators, all this type of stuff, to be able to not fight the guy, but to neutralize and get out. Like the whole, you don't have to fight the guy. You got to win the situation, create that moment, and get the fuck out of there. And so even though you're training violence and yes, there's intense stuff, but then you go to fighters who are in fact, again, it's gladiators. You know what I mean? They are literally being like, no, we are not going to avoid. Matter of fact, we're trying to sign more and more fights to build this career, to do all this stuff. And so it is such a different duration, like time under tension is very different. The demands are very, very different, right? And
100%.
And that's important to note and that's where those pitfalls of how you navigate that. I think that I asked kind of a question in the beginning of like, does martial arts itself does that develop into people the self-actualization pursuit? Like, does it automatically give this people a thing where like, this is something I'll do for the rest of my life. There is no end to this. I never want to finish this. I want to grow and develop in this. And the reality is that what we do lends itself more to that in a way, for all the reasons we've listed, like when do you want to retire from being responsible for your safety? So we have less landmines, like we have less hardships in a way in our path to be able to hopefully find that groove where, again, even like, you know, and you could talk about like the different phases of your career and the kickboxing and pad work and how brutal that was, but also not that long ago, a 5-year deep dive into jiu-jitsu with a lot of time under tension, with a lot of like, you know, traveling everywhere with a lot of, you know, I mean, people that bring pressure, and that ain't easy. Like, you know what I mean?
It's hard on the body, and a lot of this. So two things. The first thing is, so we have that sort of continuum of goal setting and visualization and self-talk and arousal control. Goal setting is the first one for a reason. And we talked about this in the last podcast, but certainly myself, and there may be others out there that in retrospect, like the goals were not very well established from the beginning. And you think of goals as in, what is your goal for your athletic career? And that was the problem. Rather than the goal, what is your goal for your life? What do you want your life to be about? Because the training is going to be a part of that. And because of, you know, like it's a lot of focus on the potential violent assaults and all this kind of stuff, but it's just your life is made of the time that it's made of. And so all those like kickboxing and jiu-jitsu and weapons training and the whole thing together is just like so semi-magical, and it's so beautiful, and it's so much fun. So you want it to be part of your life, you know, forever. And there are physical aspects that will start to get a little bit, you know, deteriorate a little bit, probably.
Yep.
And there's other aspects that continue to grow. There's attributes that continue to grow at any age. So you when you go in with that in mind, you can have a lot better outcomes, you know, certainly long term, but short term as well. And the second thing is that one of the blessings that, you know, that Dustin and Brad and all your crew have is that you, by beginning in PFS back in those days, I think it was the training methods, and they were more efficacious, and they were more practical, all those things. But also, they always had that spirit of it's never over. They always had that spirit of, like the story is kind of apocryphal, you know, like in the sense they say like when people get older, they get better at jiu-jitsu, and that was part of their MO, and that's true or not. It's not a zero. Like there's some jiu-jitsu athletes that get better and they get older, but you know most of it's quite hard on the body, and it's not. The story is better than the reality kind of thing, fortunately.
Yeah.
But the idea. Like say Dan Inosanto, and that was kind of the idea, that was the ideal of what an older, like, you know, 67-year-old person or 60s or something like this. There's a great video of him. I'm trying to think of what that was on, but he's doing Cali at 68, and he could be 28
Yep.
in that video. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And so having you be so immersed in that and then sharing it with your tribe back home has been an enormous blessing to all of your group. And that's something that, you know, would be great if everybody everywhere could have that same sort of, you know, overall understanding of how this all can go.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be like you're just competing and then your body's broken.
Yeah.
Or you have these issues, you're going to have these issues because you're doing MMA or doing kickboxing or whatever. You can get those borderline magical abilities from those sports without going through all of those, you know, damaging sessions and without any of that.
Yeah.
And so, and that comes back to the goals though, because they say, well, my goal was, we talked about this before, but people they say my goal was to run 10 miles. And so I trained for it. And afterwards my back was sore, my knees were sore. Was that really the best goal though? Your goal is to get healthier and become a more powerful person.
Yeah.
And with martial arts training, that's kind of what it is. You want to become a more powerful person. You want to have the ability to defend yourself. And that is not limited to the confines of any athletic career. That's your whole life.
It's your whole life.
So train in such a way now that's not going to prevent you from training later on. And if anything, your training is going to be better because of what you did today. Like the way you took care of your body, like say the way you warm up, like your maintenance work, your meditation, your breathing, your nutrition, all of it. So that your body isn't breaking down. It isn't, and getting older doesn't mean, you know, getting older starts to mean getting better.
Yeah.
Because right now, at your age, would this be, you know, perhaps the best version of yourself ever right now? Yeah,
I would. Yeah, definitely. And when I look at it in its totality, you know what I mean? Could I go back and try to nitpick and say, you know, was I faster when I was 30 or not? But in all honesty, like if I did have a faster initiation speed because my muscles were younger, I definitely didn't have the timing, or I didn't have, you know what I mean?
The bottom line is you're probably more combatively viable.
100%. 100%. Well, 1,000%. That's 100% true. It's 1,000% true. It's 100,000% true. Plus, did you notice that he said I was a blessing to you guys? I just had, I wrote that down, blessing. I just don't know if anyone's ever said that. My mom sure didn't, you know, and my dad didn't.
Well,
but Trevor Hardy said it. You heard it here first.
With a capital B.
With a capital fucking B, a blessing, yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you with that. Did you have another? Keep going.
Just keep talking about what a blessing Greg has
Keep
been.
talking about a blessing. If you're not done, man, you
I don't know
fucking
what
preach
these guys
on.
are paying you,
Preach
but
on.
it's not
Yes.
enough. It couldn't possibly be.
There it is, folks. See, that's the only time I'll shut up is if he's
Competitive
somebody else.
kickboxing does take a toll on a guy.
I do love what you said though, and I wrote down this word, and this word's
don't
not the
blame you.
best thing. What's that?
I don't blame you.
No. Task goal versus life goal, and task isn't the right word. It just eludes me right now. But when we do take up something like martial arts or this or whatever it happens to be, we do have a short-term goal of like, you know, a task-oriented goal. I want to be this champ. I want to do this. I want to do this. And I'll connect it to what Dustin and Brad both said about training tempo. And this just connection. I remember Paul and Tom and Ron, even everybody telling me this, that consistency will always outdo intensity. And for a long time, it's like, you know, and he's just like, listen, the guy that shows up every day for 10 years or shows up 3 times a week for 10 years versus the guy that shows up 7 days a week for 8 hours a day, you watch, because the pendulum, when it's too far over on one side, will swing back the other way. And it comes back to another great concept we go into called balance. And life is real hard. You got to learn to balance a bunch of shit. We talked about all of a sudden you have a family, then you've got kids, like all of this shit. And a lot of that stuff is what I think puts a period at the end of certain chapters of people's lives, right? You know, now you are finished, and you're finished. Why? Because either you couldn't balance it, or it went out of balance, or whatever it happens to be. So I did like that, the task goal or endeavor goals versus life goals. And it's great to have goals, and like you might say, fuck, I want to climb Everest, and you know, that's not a lifelong thing, it's just something I want to do. But at what cost? If your life goals aren't ahead of those endeavor goals, then people can make, you know, bad decisions, which then, like you say, You know, maybe you
Right,
get
and that's why the goal, the big goal is so important.
Yeah.
So you have your main goals, and then you have goals that are sort of, you know, part of, like, say if your goal is to become the best, like the best martial artist
Yeah.
that lives in the healthiest body,
Yeah.
period. And so you're going to do immersion in jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or weapons training or whatever it is, then those goals are secondary to your big goal.
Yeah.
So you're not compromising your physical longevity in order to do this. And so, and that doesn't preclude people from competing in those sports.
No, of course not. Yeah.
But just having this sort of ability to manage one's life and be aware, okay, this is hurting, or I can feel this isn't, and so you immediately pull back, and then the concept of this lifelong learner, if we can help people become aware of that at the very beginning, because like skills, knowledge, everything, like it's layering, and layers take time to build. That's probably the reference. Like when they said this quote where 3 months.
Yeah.
It like so you're laying down these skill sets, and it takes time to do that. And there's no, you know, like real mastery. There's no rushing it.
Yeah, that's right.
But you're doing it in such a way where you minimizing the physical toll on the body, and everything that entails, like with the proper stretching, the proper strength training, the proper breathing, and getting adequate rest, and just, you know, like we're Brad talking about the visualization, and things that are very, very beneficial, but not hard on the body. And it's refreshing to see some of the best martial artists in the world, Sean Strickland in MMA and Craig Jones in Jiu-Jitsu recently, kind of half joking, but they're both saying this is like the top athletes in those sports. It's in Jiu-Jitsu is hard on the body, and you basically better off to not do it. This is the number 2 guy in the world, right?
Yeah.
And Sean Strickland was a champion. And somebody asked him, what would you say to a young athlete who's thinking about getting MMA? He says, I'd say don't do it. And he goes off on all the reasons why. And that's not necessarily that you want to completely dissuade people from enjoying those competitive sports, but just having that awareness and helping people go back to re-examining their goals.
Yeah.
Like, what is really your goal for this body in this life on this planet?
Yeah. No, I love it. And sorry.
Oh, just real quick, just listen to that, Trevor. I think that the exception is that, not the rule, where there's people imparting that type of wisdom when somebody is just at the infancy stage of their journey, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that is not a perception or perspective that is often shared by most when they first start.
Absolutely, and that's what we're saying. The two things we're saying is that we'd like to see people start to do that more, number one. And number two, you guys are really blessed by Greg LeBlanc. And second point.
I just got another soundbite. I'm going to make that a GIF, just over on repeat. Hey? If you could do a real powerful hand motion with that, we're going to set that
The
up.
second one really can't be overstated. Yeah. But that's right. You're absolutely right, Brad. That's not a common theme in the places that I've traveled to, and all the people that I've worked with. That it's not really a common theme, with the exception of the PFS group, and with, you know, how Greg has taken that spirit and brought it back here to Edmonton and area. To the extent that it's not in quote unquote, this sounds disparaging, not in the real martial arts, like not in the actual functional kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, boxing, wrestling, MMA realm.
Yep.
And going forward though, let's try to change that.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing with it too is, like you said, why I thought this is a good topic, and I think it's been a great conversation thus far, is again, it's like, you know, we come very much from like solving a problem, and it's to me, it's there's a sense of urgency in solving this problem, because nobody has a crystal ball, so you don't know when you might, find your family's life in jeopardy. You have these young guys that, again, it's a very visual thing right now, because you're seeing Sean Strickland's and Conor McGregor's, and there is a lot of shiny things to hold up, and so you get a lot of young men that are like, this is fucking exciting. I want to do this. I want this fame, this status, this, that. And you don't have a lot of people out there in any of the realms that are saying what we're saying, which is no matter what you're going into and what you're looking for, big picture goals. What are the life goals? It needs to, or it should, at least recognize the tremendous benefits that are there if you are integrating, these sub goals into overall life goals. There are examples of it out there, but to talk about like the Dan Inosanto reference, because that was very clearly one of my reference points for this, and to see this guy in his 60s and to hear Dan saying that you don't even begin to develop these attributes even close to a peak state until you're in your late 70s, early 80s. So you see Dan doing it, you hear these great stories, but you don't know the process. Like changed as he got older. You don't hear that unless you've met him, unless you know him, unless you're close enough to model what he's done. I guarantee you most people think if I just do the same arts that he's doing or whatever it is, I get the same result. That is so far from the truth. I mean, for how many years you referenced Dan Inosanto starting his jiu-jitsu career in his late 50s, if not his 60s, early 60s. I think it was late 50s when he started with the Machados. But Dan also traveling 3 weekends out of a month doing seminars around the world, and he was doing his private lessons. And for, I think it was almost 4 or 5 years straight, he never missed a single private lesson. He would teach seminars, fly home on the red eye. If he couldn't arrange his schedule, and I remember him saying with his weight training and his rehab training and strength and conditioning training, he said, I'll tell you what, if I can't remember the exact ages, but he said, if I was in my 20s and I missed, I could miss a week and I'd be back on track within a day. In your 30s, but and the point is now if I'm 50s, if I miss a workout, if I miss a private, if I miss a training thing, if I miss this, he goes, I'm 3 to 4 days to get back to where I was, never mind progressing. So again, it's like he also has this, wherever he got it from, he has a blueprint. He had a model of some sorts to have lifelong goals, and he understood and had discipline. That's the thing. It's not just passion. He had the discipline to follow this path, and that to me is, again, if you're going to lead by example, you can't just hold up, a figurehead or a name or something without understanding the process. Because like anything else, it is a process, and you have to understand the process to work the process to get the result, right? So I think that's an important part of it is modeling and having conversations like this, and people with your experience is saying, listen, you can compete, you can do these things. However, understand these things and life goals and stuff. And for what we do, saying the same thing, that no matter how imminent the problem might be, there's a way. The means doesn't justify the ends. Is that right? The ends doesn't justify the means. Sorry. And so just trashing or doing something in the short term at the cost of the long term, again, puts a period at the end of a sentence where it means you will finish, whether you want to or not. I don't know if that makes sense.
You will, unfortunately. And to try to make it conceptually clear for everybody that we talk to, and with our training organization in general, is sort of now characterized by the 3 filters we have. Because whatever you're doing with training, whether it's strength conditioning or martial arts or healthy living practice, it has to make your body feel better, perform better, and last longer.
That's right.
Or don't do it.
Yep.
Those are the filters.
Yep.
And so kickboxing, is that going to have a negative effect on your longevity? Not necessarily. If you're training kickboxing every day and you're sparring all the time and you're competing all the time, there will be eventually some negative ramifications and so you basically manage your life in such a way where that never happens. But you get, as Brad quoted, as much juice from the squeeze of training in terms of your skill sets and your mechanics and your wherewithal as it relates to striking without damaging your body. And same thing with jiu-jitsu. And same thing with strength training and cardiovascular conditioning and all of that. So and it's something that each person has to sort of. It's great if you have someone helping you and you can help you develop this, like that ability to be your own coach and your own manager and your own sort of instructor in that way is so important, because it's actually different for different people.
Yeah, that's right.
Some people could run, like literally run, 10 miles a day forever
Yeah.
and never have any problems. And the majority of people will, big problems. And so, but so you have to be like, how are you managing your life in that way? Are you able to really put what you're doing through these filters against the backdrop of the goal of just being like the healthiest, most powerful, which generally speaking, leads to the healthiest, most powerful, leads to also the kindest, most altruistic version of oneself.
Yeah.
Almost, automatically.
Yeah.
And so, and then those are the people that are part of the world and making a better world per se. Now, the violence aspect of what you're doing, because it's that violence that requires so much preparation, like real violence, real combat, like all the things that entails. It's just like the martial art what you're doing, your practice, what you're doing becomes necessarily more intelligent, more powerful, and more beautiful. And that's what with training in general, that's what we want. The most powerful, the most intelligent, the most beautiful training, because that's what our life, the time of our life is used to do those things. So that makes just better people. And yeah, like that, you were the first person that I'm aware of that was from the beginning thinking about training. Like, here we are 30 some years later.
Yeah.
But as soon as you connected with a group in California, you were already talking about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't hear anybody else ever
Yeah.
say anything about that.
Yeah. No, it is. It's a testament to Paul and Dan and that lineage for sure, because wherever they got it from or however that was passed on, that has always been one of their. I've heard every single one of them all talk and reference the exact same way. They all had that. This is never finished, and that was how they are living their lives, and that was the blueprint and the model. And I'm very grateful for that as well, because like I said, without having been exposed directly to it by them, and I don't think you really know what you're. I don't know if I mean, I always talked about it because they always talked about it. So I never feel like I had a aha moment where I learned it. I feel like I was just always given that gift. Always in it and always given that gift. And it's now looking back going, oh shit, thank fucking God they did it. Because I can see where you can go a different path where it would have been, I would not still be in this. Like you can see 100 different ways where you could be taken out of this. You know what I mean? Just through that type of intense training and not recognizing I need to pull back from this. I need to adapt this. I don't have to stop this by any means. I just gotta, change directions a little. I gotta course correct a little bit, right? And that's sometimes you feather something down or just change something or whatever it is, right? So, and yet I don't feel like at any point in the time that any of that navigating through things came at the cost of skill or knowledge or experience or any of those things. I feel like the only thing it did was help me avoid the high probability of increased wear, tear, destruction on my body. You know what I mean?
That's right. And so the naysayers would say something like, but you didn't get to compete in athletic competition.
Yeah.
And I don't know about most, but certainly as someone that did do those things, to say, well, that is less important.
Sure.
And it's, as you get older, it becomes borderline not important at all. Like these things, like say you competed, but how much did that help you now? Like, did you need to do that to get to this point?
Yeah.
And if we come back to the having powerful, well thought out goals, then just generally speaking, the sad thing about life is that as we get older, we get smarter, and thank goodness for some of us, and or at least less stupid, and just in time for our bodies to be too old too often. So if we're aware of that, and we're aware that getting older can mean getting better,
Yeah.
but that depends on what you're doing as you're getting older.
Yeah.
And so take competition for what it is. Like there's lots of great things about it,
Yeah.
and people can get something out of that. But if your goal is just to become like the most powerful version of yourself and the best possible conduit that the life expresses itself through, then competition is not necessary. And to the extent that someone still wants to do it, keep that in mind. Those filters.
Yeah. 100%.
Decide your body has to feel better, perform better, last longer because of what you're doing, or do something else.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. Yeah, those filters really do just make it very simple for people to just plug them in, and you're going to get the results you're going to get, right? So, and then make the right adjustments. Okay, Dustin, Brad, any final thoughts here? I think we'll get ready to kind of wrap this up here a little bit, but I don't know, just I thought, again, an interesting conversation into it. I mean, just never finishing. This group is what we are talking about. That people hopefully can model and learn from, because we have our mentors that are, guys that have been training, 50 years, 60 years, and they're still going and they're still doing it. So I don't know, any final thoughts on this for people?
Just super quick. Kind of the analogy that hit me is, as we've all been talking, is, when you train, you can train the same way that you can invest money for your future. You can invest money for your retirement, or you can choose to go spend the weekend in Vegas. And I think the same goes for training. We, in our weaponizing, we've been blessed by Greg LeBoeuf. So we we train like we're investing for the future. Do you know what I mean? Like we're not.
That's a great analogy.
On the alternative, people can train like they're spending the weekend in Vegas. So it's exactly what Trevor just finished talking about. Is I think that's just what it is. We're not looking to blow all our money in one weekend, kind of thing. So.
No, great. Once again,
This
the
is the
analogy
topic
guy
we're
comes
going to
through.
dive into regularly on the Hard Living podcast, actually.
Well, then Dustin's analogy, you can just play a little clip. Hey, invest like you're investing for your retirement, not like you're going to Vegas for the weekend. There you go. That'll be a fun segment into things. The Better Living Hard podcast. Investment for your future, not the fucking weekend in Vegas. There you go. Okay, Brad, any
Financial
final
responsibility is such a huge part of a self-actualized life. Go ahead, Brad.
Brad, any final thoughts?
I think that the pool is small. What I mean by that is, you have to be fortunate to be blessed by coming in contact with the right people on your journey. I'm poking fun,
It's
but
no good
I'm
without
also,
the name. You got to say the name.
I'm also being serious. I'm blessed by Greg LeBoeuf. But because as people get older, there's not a lot of people that have been training for 50, 60 years. There's a lot of people that have been training for 1 year, and that could be all they go, right? But what I mean by that is again, it comes back to you got to be fortunate enough to be cross paths with somebody that has that wisdom to share with you, right?
Yeah.
And there's
modeling
not a lot of people that have that have the lifelong pursuit of one particular thing throughout their whole life. So.
Yeah, no, I think, especially I think maybe when you talk about things like martial arts and different things like that and stuff, right? So, 100%, well said. Trevor, final thoughts?
You and I talked about this concept of the unified field fighting.
You talked, I listened, yes.
Yes. So we have with unified field theory of everything, we've got gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear force. With fighting, we've got weapons range, striking range, trapping or attachment range, and ground fighting. So a life could be spent mastering, like working towards a very high level, and even mastery might even be an overstatement in each of those ranges without damaging the body in a way that connects all of them together. And you talk about having a small pool, the number of people that can do that have real mastery, in weapons range, into striking range, into trapping or attachment range, into the ground, is pretty small. But each of those ranges is just so magically beautiful and worth all the time that would be invested invested responsibly in achieving the level wherewithal. And so as we all sort of move forward, that helping connect more people with that possibility. Like letting people know that that's available to them. Like say that you can do all these things, like each of those things, and have these like borderline magical abilities in each of these ranges against the backdrop of a life that is always getting better. And like the PFS approach and the approach that you've adopted has always been this evidence-based approach. Like say this is what works. I mean, say this weekend I'm up here and we're training like the real world self-defense, looking at videos of real assaults and then unpacking them and breaking them down and what are the takeaways here, and understanding that the methods that we're employing, the things that we're doing are very much, you know, an answer to the problems these situations present. And that sort of sharing of information with the world and saying like this is out there for you, and all of those skills like you can have, and that mastering each of those ranges actually has a radiative effect. We don't have time to talk about this right now, but we when you first started doing this, and I was like, geez, I don't know, this is a mistake. You're going to be doing this weapons training and trapping, and your kickboxing is going to go downhill. And so that wasn't the case at all. The weapons training had an enormously radiative sort of supportive effect, and I saw it with my some of my own students. And with yours. And so that's that was the final point I wanted to make is that if more people have the ability to connect with you and with all of these concepts, then that's great. Once again, Greg can be a blessing not only to Dustin and Ryan and myself, but to everyone everywhere.
To everyone everywhere. That's a great way to. My favorite part of this was how the religious tone that it took. And I enjoyed that part of it and the blessings that were bestowed upon people. Again, okay. I love it. I love it all. Again, once the thing, you know, again, we're over an hour here. We obviously could get together and talk for multiple hours at a time. Again, I hope people found value in this, because this type of conversation will allow people to have a much more long, fulfilled life with a lot of blessings in it, especially if they reach out. Okay, we're going to end it here. So listen, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Trevor, thanks a lot, man. It's great having you up here. Thanks for jumping on the podcast. It's last minute and stuff like that, but it was great to have you. Dustin, Brad, as always.